For the past year and a half, closer to 2 years now, I've made a conscious effort to bring more positivity into the finite amount of time that is my life. And one of the aspects of my life revolves around the furry fandom. A part of me shivers in revulsion, as I'll be the first to admit that I can be critical, cynical, facetious, and even sarcastic when it comes to furries and their social conventions. However, as I've personally matured and grown as an individual, it has dawned on me that furry is an extremely loose concept, and the only variable that affects your experience in the fandom is you. Participating in the furry fandom is a very individual experience in my eyes. There are definitely, without a doubt, some horrible, awkward, and asinine aspects to the fandom. But an important thing which I regret not knowing for a very long time is that you pick and choose your own personal adventure within the fandom. And the same goes for life outside the fandom, or any other fandom that you choose to be part of. And when it comes to things which are unavoidable, whether due to social obligations or confrontation, it is up to you to be the change you want to see. In other words, leading by example. When Kothorix's video appeared on my recommendation list, it genuinely piqued my curiosity, as the aforementioned cynicism is still deeply rooted within myself when it comes to furries. And I don't think criticism is a bad thing, nor cynicism, nor sarcasm. Critical thinking is essential for better judgment and understanding. Cynicism correlates with skepticism, and that, in turn, helps to prevent you from falling into situations which can cause you emotional or physical harm. And sarcasm, well, that's just plain funny. Anyway, I originally wanted to dislike the video because I am on a personal pursuit to generate more positivity into my life. But the fact of the matter is, I simply cannot dislike the video. I'm not necessarily praising it, nor am I dissing the concept either. The facts that Kothorix brought forward are valid, relevant, and in some cases relevant. I'm aware that there's quite a bit of backlash to this video, as you would expect from a bold statement such as "furries are toxic." It is indeed a bold and controversial point in and of itself. However, controversy draws people's attention. It generates prolonged dispute and causes mental altercation. Kothorix is a much more experienced YouTube user than I am, and I am sure he has a better understanding of what makes videos on YouTube generate more traffic, as his "Furries Are Toxic" video has over 800,000 views. Probably a million once I get this done. But with that being said, the critic in me may suggest that the content that was produced was overly scandalous for the sake of his channel. And there is nothing inherently wrong with optimizing YouTube videos to generate traffic, as I understand the desire to be successful, whether it's a hobby or a primary source of income. However though, I cannot shake the feeling that perhaps maybe some of the content was overly sensationalized for the sake of better video statistics. I could be wrong in such regard, but ultimately there could be a chance that Kothorix was stirring the pot, catering to a YouTube audience of angsty teenagers who just don't know any better, and then profiting from not only YouTube but also from Patreon. Now, I don't know whether or not YouTube is Kothorix's main form of income. The video in question is well made. You can clearly tell that he put a great deal of effort into the video itself as a product of labor. But one of the biggest gripes that I can't seem to dismiss after watching 34 minutes of his content is that yes, there are severe, damaging, and hurtful issues within the fandom, the vast majority of which also applies to many other fandoms and society as a whole. More on that later, but after making these compelling points of awareness, he just kinda gets up and leaves. Now, I know he mentioned that not all furries are bad, which is true, but for someone like me who only watched the one video he made, and I am sure this applies to a lot of people because this one particular video came up in a lot of random people's YouTube recommendation lists. But anyway, there really wasn't any real suggestion nor solution to the issues he brought up within the particular video. After explaining the issues, no matter how valid they may be, he didn't give any solace nor clarity to the issues drawn to attention, that they are indeed society issues that apply in many cultures and fandoms. I had a general feeling throughout the time I was watching the video that he just generated controversy, stirred the pot, profited via YouTube and Patreon, didn't really give any solution to the argument he made, but instead he just kinda announced his exit from the fandom and left it at that. I can absolutely, positively, 100% tell you, Kothorix, that I deeply understand to the highest degree possible that furries can be infuriatingly frustrating beyond all recognition. The sensation of futility is something that I've felt before too. Many times actually, so I can understand where you're coming from. You just gonna have to take my word for it. I've never really been a large participant of the fandom. Even now, I don't include myself in many aspects because I've grown to learn a thing or two, and if you're still watching, I encourage you to listen as to why I still involve myself in the fandom, even if it's to a small degree. The thing that kinda irks me the most is the ironically toxic nature of your video against furries can perpetuate hate. A fair amount of those 800,000 plus video views are from people who know little to nothing about the fandom. It can cause people to preemptively judge all furry. And I'm sure you're aware that there are some amazing people with extraordinary skills and wonderful personalities within the fandom. And for the sake of all the wonderful and kind-spirited people who consider themselves furries, this sort of toxicity that you've provided can hurt their reputation as an artist, a creator, or just a person in general. It can also cause unjustified fear, and as we all know, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. I guess you could say that any sense of guidance or help towards the furry fandom that Kothorix may originally had has now become counterproductive with his Furries Are Toxic video. So, where does this really leave us? Well, I do have to give credit to Kothorix for bringing awareness to issues and problems within the fandom. All the issues that were brought to light I already knew about, and the nuances of the furry fandom has been an interest of my observation for quite some time. It's the very reason why I'm making this video. I've had more than my fair share of frustrations with a fair amount of furries, and perhaps if I were still a teenager or in my early 20s, I would be a huge fan of his angst and happily press the nuclear launch button to purge the furries outright. It's just another thing you have to take my word for, as the purpose of this video is not revolved around my personal grievances, but I can tell you with absolute certainty and full disclosure that I have been at the wrong end of malice and or ignorance by furries who were severely demented. But releasing metaphorical nuclear war and perpetuating hate is not how issues should be solved. I like to think that I'm a person of reason and have good intuition, though I wasn't necessarily born with these attributes. There have been a lot of things to which I wish I knew well ahead of time, and before I dive into more intricate details, I want to stress one very important thing. You, as a person, the viewer, are responsible for your own happiness. Whether it's within the furry fandom or not, life in general, you have to take the initiative to seek after your own personal goals and what will make you happy. Life is what you make of it. It's a pick your own adventure. Nothing is given, it is earned. I also encourage you to be the change you want to see happen. I used to be this miserable, jaded, cold, loathing person, and it didn't get me anywhere. I'm still very much cynical and critical, and I still have room for improvement, but I am indeed happier than I was 5 to 6 years ago. I'm saying all this because the furry fandom is what you make of it and who you surround yourself with. For all the truly awful people within the fandom, there are some absolutely wonderful and interesting individuals to befriend and to bond with. And if you say something is shitty and awful and perpetuate those feelings, then your self-fulfilling prophecy will come true because you are influencing it. So, be a good influence to yourself to not only further improve your own life, but it will also have a positive effect towards the fandom and the people you surround yourself with. Engaging in an endeavor of such magnitude can backlash severely. It's a daunting process to which I have legitimate concerns that if I don't handle this topic correctly, it can reap severe negative repercussions. One thing that I am certain of, though, is that within the 13 years of observing this fandom, is that there are definitely issues, and there is definitely toxicity perpetuated by some of the population of the fandom. Why is that, though? Well, as you, the viewer, are aware, the term furry is an extremely loose term that blankets many people from all walks of life. Granted, there are majorities of populace within the fandom, but there are no prerequisites to enter the fandom. So this means that absolutely anybody can call themselves a furry, and there is absolutely nobody that will take that away from anybody. There is no furry police, and I don't think there's anyone who will want to live with that role. This is the part where I want to make it painfully clear that I am extremely aware and fully understanding that there are some truly awful, disgusting, manipulative, mentally damaged, creepy, revolting people within the fandom. However, with that being said, animal abusers, pedophiles, necrophiliacs, neo-Nazis, nymphomaniacs, sociopaths, lazy underachievers, sexual predators, two-faced lying schemers, catfishers, egotistical fuckwits, narcissists, drug abusers, deranged degenerates, disease spreaders, hate speakers, bigots, thin-skinned, easily offended special snowflakes, double standard abusers, lackluster personality booers are sometimes found not only in the furry fandom but in society in general. Now, you could argue that the term furry attracts and gathers people whose characteristics could be defined as weird. But honestly, what is life without a little bit of variety? Now, don't get me wrong here, investing heavily into being obscene can be detrimental in the pursuit of achieving real-life success. The type of success you need in order to survive and thrive in human society, such as reliable income, social skills, problem-solving, critical thinking, etc. But having a little bit of weirdness and moderation can ignite what makes you happy. Another big piece of advice that I can give is, well, tread lightly in regards to the furry fandom. Over-investing in any weird fandom, and let's face it, furries are weird, it can lead to some uncomfortable and or damaging situations. If something doesn't feel right, you have every right to excuse yourself or to stand up for yourself. Change starts with the individual. When it comes to the furry fandom, I personally don't see it as a communal society or a subculture. It's definitely not a cult, let me tell you that much. And any sense of community or pride that I have in regards to the furry fandom is bare minimal. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Then again, I don't really have much pride when it comes to human society in general. It just means that I view the fandom from an individual perspective. Calling yourself a furry isn't what makes someone interesting. It's their actions and their personality. Don't get me wrong here, I created some really good friendships along the way to which I am eternally grateful. But personally, I don't feel a sense of community within the fandom because, well, I don't feel a sense of community within society. And furries are people. So with that being said, my outlook when it comes to furry is that it's an individual experience, and you make of it what you will. You surround yourself with people who you want to be around with. Number one piece of advice to solving these damaging issues is to take an individual perspective into the fandom. Being the change that you want to see happen, and picking and choosing not only who you want to surround yourself with, but also choosing what events and social gatherings you like to attend to as well. Socializing, it can be a lot of work, especially for someone like me who is not only an introvert, but also has been working towards combating my social anxiety. I can tell you from personal experience that it is indeed difficult to make new friends, but it is absolutely rewarding if you invest wisely. Number two would be coming to terms that you, as an individual, cannot control, nor change, nor police large amount of groups within the fandom. For all the sick-minded people that I see in the fandom, and in society as a whole, I do wish, for a lack of a better term, I wish I can correct them. But, as long as they're not abusing nor hurting anybody, the bottom line is, it's none of your business. They themselves are responsible for their actions, and those actions will have consequences. Then the only thing you can pretty much do, maybe, is to politely give them advice. But you cannot force their hand. Now, if they are abusing anybody or abusing animals, then those people will face the full extent of the law. Word gets around, especially in the fandom where a lot of people have a sense of microcosm community, and with intervention from authorities, animal abusers, they will reap what they sow. If you have concrete evidence of somebody hurting or abusing anybody, and this includes animals, then you are more than welcome to blow the whistle. If you suspect foul play but have no evidence, you're more than welcome to keep those suspicious feelings, but spreading false information can be severely damaging to a number of people, since there could be a chance that you could be completely wrong. Number 3 piece of advice is that if you are concerned about disease being spread via sexual intercourse, well, nobody's forcing you to have sex with furries. But if somebody is sexually preying upon you, then you have every right to defend yourself and or contact authorities. Just because you're at a furry convention and or wearing a big animal costume, it does not mean others have the consent to sexually assault you. It is fundamentally wrong. And let's say you like the idea of having sexual encounters at a furry convention. No judgment from me. Then I would heavily advise that you use some sort of protection. I think that would go without saying. Or, if it's premeditated, you can ask your partner to get tested beforehand. Again, it really boils down to social responsibility, and that starts with the individual. Alternatively, you might be able to find someone to date within the fandom. It is absolutely feasible to find an interesting individual online or at an event, and really develop a genuine bond, which could lead to a long-term relationship. Though furries, they tend to have a wider range of belief as to what they think is a monogamous traditional relationship. So, before emotionally investing in someone, you ought to make damn well sure that the two of you are aware of what you want out of a relationship and if it's fundamentally compatible. Again, it boils down to personal responsibility. Number 4 piece of advice is to remember that some social situations within the fandom are just unavoidable, and it is up to you to be the bigger person. This also applies in real life too. Like, how many times you've been at a Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas dinner with your family? How about the social gatherings with your coworkers that you don't like but have to endure because of the means of the business? Hell, even little things such as grocery shopping, running errands, or going to the movie theater can be socially troublesome. There will be social obligations that you will have to endure. It is a testament of character of how an individual handles them. If you're good to yourself, good to others, put a smile on, and bring positivity, you will influence others and ultimately make your experience more enjoyable. Or perhaps just a little less agonizing. Number 5 would be that social media is rampant among furries. It's as if it was specifically catered to them, with all the bullshit, asinine, pompous, trivial pursuits that you will see on Twitter or whatever. Most of them will eventually fall into obscurity. Another thing to take into account is that almost everybody only ever post their greatest successes or just plain fabricated lies to social media. Very rarely do you see someone share their most difficult, darkest hardships. Comparison is the thief of happiness. So, don't take social media too seriously, since most of the time it's a very insincere image of what a person or people actually are. And the final piece of advice I can think that correlates to this video to helping issues within the fandom is in regards to etiquette. This could fall under the first piece of advice that I give, that being individuality and improving one's personal life. And for that matter, this and all the other things I mentioned can also be applied in the real world too. You may have also noticed by now that I haven't criticized any of the points that Kothorix has brought up. This is because what he mentioned in the video have elements of truth behind them in regards to some people. One of the valid and concerning things that was brought to attention is the lack of social etiquette that a fair amount of furries exhibit. I am sure I don't need to mention examples of furries behaving tactless. A lot of cringe compilations include them, but when I'm eating dinner, I really don't need to see artwork of a quadriplegic furry with an erect dog dick being pissed on by another furry who is disgustingly obese with a gross body hair and had his genitals mutilated into a pseudo-vagina. Also, at any real-life social gathering, I really don't need to be excessively hugged, nor do I need to be petted, nor smooched, licked, nor have weird animal sounds being barked at me, especially in public. Having proper etiquette also applies to fursuiters as well. I'm absolutely on board when it comes to showcasing cool costumes during appropriate times. Some of the well-made fursuits are a testament of good craftsmanship, and it's pretty cool to admire them. But fursuiters who are out of place, they can be off-putting, as Kothorix did bring up. Having furries attend or crash public settings or events they weren't invited to is pretty inconsiderate towards people who are just trying to mind their own business. However, if it's something that was planned ahead of time, such as fursuit bowling, and the bowling lanes gave permission, and if the fursuiters left the people who didn't want to be involved alone, I don't mind that too much. Halloween is another occasion which I feel comfortable fursuiting, as it is a holiday where people, furry or not, dress up in neat costumes and may even act out a character of their choosing. Furry conventions are pretty much catered for fursuiters. It's the most appropriate place for them to be, as the event is showcasing them in a variety of ways. I feel it's the best place for furries who like to fursuit to do what they love to do. You could argue that there aren't enough furry conventions and that expenses are too staggering. That being said, there have been more and more furry conventions come to fruition within the past decade. As for expenses, well, any hobby, whether it be cars, guns, music, hockey, they are all expensive in their own right. But when it comes to people who feel a fundamental need to put on a furry costume and pretend to be an obnoxious animal towards strangers in a public setting for no real reason or event, I find that to be kind of disturbing. It's a reason why I am reluctant to do any public fursuiting. I would feel out of place. Imagine a Civil War reenactor who always wore a costume and never broke character and was causing a scene in public. And when he was confronted about it, he would just say, "Oh, I'm just having fun." In any regard, however, I believe showing tact, class, and social etiquette will go a long way to making a person, or in this case a furry, much more approachable and even respectable. Welcome to the part that you have all skipped to. So the million-dollar question is, are furries toxic? You really have to understand that it's quite a difficult question to definitively answer. Technically speaking, however, yes, some furries are toxic. This is because the term furry is such a loose concept that I heavily believe that it is indeed an arbitrary classification. The plain and simple truth is that furries are people, and any functioning adult will know that there are a lot of toxic and damaging people in this world. It is indeed absolutely horrible what some people do, whether they are a furry or not, and they should indeed feel the full extent of the law. But it does not matter whether said person or people are furries or not. Actions have consequences no matter what personal title someone gives themselves or has thrust upon them. Furry covers a large range of people that I wouldn't even call it a culture in and of itself. I like to think of it more as a passive lifestyle. Letting furry define who you are outright is completely illogical. In short, the title furry is so ambiguous it's almost meaningless in the long run. This is because individuals make up the fandom. It is up to the individual to be the change they want to be, to lead by example, to surround themselves with who they want to be around with. Social responsibility does not rely on anything arbitrary, not a fandom, not a community. It's solely up to the individual to succeed with those efforts. So, to definitively conclude outright as to whether or not furries are toxic, the answer is not necessarily. Life, society, fandoms, demographics, and cultures, they all have their bad apples. For anyone who is concerned about toxicity, I encourage you to be the change you want to see happen. You may not think you have any impact, but I'm here to tell you that you do. Even if you don't participate in the furry fandom, I still encourage you to not preemptively judge other people. Whether they're a furry or not should not matter. I ask this because prejudice spreads, and that can have lasting negative impacts. When it comes to furries, just think about what life is all about. The good, the bad, and then imagine life with a little less mundane and a little bit more variety. That's what furries are. People, good and bad, escaping the routine of mundane life to ignite passion, even if it's just being silly for a short amount of time. Some of my best friends are furries, some of them are not. The point is, never stop improving your personal life. Never stop growing as a person. Take charge in what you want from life and who you want to spend it with. Do not hate people over an arbitrary label, but also don't give people a legitimate reason to hate you. My Twitter is Marlo Seneca for news, updates, and further musings. Thank you so much for watching, and stay frosty.